By the way, somebody asked me, is the Constitution a living document? I said, no, it's dead here in Washington, D.C., but it's also not a living document. I want to make that clear. It's exactly what the founders intended.
I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and this is my take on the news. Really happy to be joined today by Congressman Tom Massie from the state of Kentucky. Tom, Congressman, thanks for joining us.
And thanks for having me on again.
You know, I've watched your saga. We've had you come and speak here in Wisconsin with us. I've watched how the media, I think very unfairly, treated you over the last year or so in terms of you defending the Constitution amidst all these unusual circumstances. But what's really interesting about this, a lot of people have noted this, that it's amazing how many people now are talking about the conversation on both sides of the aisle. It seems like, for various reasons, progressives and conservatives have now found that the Constitution's an important thing. I think you should get a lot of credit for that. I don't know that you do all the time, but talk about how this process has worked for you, how it's come full circle.
Well, listen, on March 27th, the Republicans and Democrats proposed that Congress stay home and let Nancy Pelosi pass a bill by unanimous consent here in the House of Representatives. Well, I had quoted the Constitution, and it says you have to have a quorum present in order to do business in the House. And in other words, you have to have half of the U.S. House of Representatives present. Now, people got so mad at me. Even the president called me up, and I can't share the details of that phone call, but the tweets he sent out against me might indicate his displeasure that I was asking for Congress to show up and do its job. There's the constitutional argument that you have to have a quorum. These aren't some archaic House rules, right? This isn't Robert's Rules of Orders or Jefferson's Manual. It's in the Constitution. But the pragmatic argument is, and I always like to give both arguments, if truckers and nurses and farmers and grocery store workers are going to work, why shouldn't Congress go to work? Congress can get paid $174,000 a year. Show up and do your job. If you don't want to, give your voting card to let somebody else have your seat. But you shouldn't be telling the people you're representing them and then not coming to Congress. Now, there was one time when CNN got the headline correct about me. They said I was the most hated man in Washington, D.C. And I read the headline. I'm like, actually, that might be true. Anyways, but you know as you pointed out, things have turned around now. Here we are 2 months later. Nancy Pelosi has called us into session. Okay, they said I was reckless for making us show up to work. Well, she had us show up to work. But she's got a new plan. There's 60 Democrats who didn't come to work today, because Nancy Pelosi says you could stay in California and vote by proxy if you don't feel like coming to work. Now, the Republicans, many of whom were so mad at me on March 27th and throwing me under the bus because I said you have to have a quorum in order to do business, they have brought a lawsuit today against Nancy Pelosi because she passed this rule on a party line that says you can vote by proxy and you wouldn't even have to have a quorum present. And so they're citing the quorum requirement in the Constitution, the same one that I cited 2 months ago to this day that made some of them so mad they gave to my Republican primary opponent. That's how mad they got at me for quoting the Constitution. And now they're parties in the lawsuit. They're plaintiffs.
It's amazing to me, and it makes me wonder, too, on the part of Nancy Pelosi, to what degree is this proxy stuff trying to set up or normalize the idea that Americans are voting for home? That's their big push right now. And I certainly hope that the constitutional Republicans, few of them as they are, able to hold a line on that. Do you think she's got a chance of getting that passed? Proxy voting, the home ballots?
Well, here's the scary thing, and I'm not saying it shouldn't work this way, but it was a House resolution, not a House bill. So when she passed it on party lines, it didn't have to be passed in the Senate, and it didn't have to be signed by the president. And all it had in the bill, and this is the part that I think is unconstitutional, that this adds insult to injury to the Constitution. By the way, somebody asked me, is the Constitution a living document? I said, no, it's dead here in Washington, D.C., but it's also not a living document. I want to make that clear. It's exactly what the founders intended. But so her House rule, the way they wrote it, the House physician, whose position I can't find in the Constitution, shall notify the House Sergeant at Arms, whose position I can't find in the Constitution, who was also, by the way, those are the same House Sergeant at Arms when John Boehner was Speaker. Like, this is the deep Congress, okay? That those two will notify each other, and then one of them will notify the Speaker, and the Speaker will institute proxy voting. Now, there's no vote of the House of Representatives to say that there's a legitimate pandemic and to institute that. And from a pragmatic, and again, there's the pragmatic argument and the constitutional argument. From a pragmatic viewpoint, this should require, I think, a supermajority if you're going to vote remotely. The insinuation is that there's an emergency, exigent circumstances so great, and the legislation is so important that it needs to be passed without Congress present. Well, there should at least be a supermajority requirement in there, because otherwise what you've done is you've let the Speaker of the House run the tables. She can have every single one of her members stay home. Well, actually, 11 of them would have to come because they'll hold the proxies. Each member under her rules can hold 10 proxy votes. So she could get to a majority with just a dozen members here in the House. And so that's really bad. It's enhanced the power of the Speaker of the House. And basically, even within her own party, it's taken away, it's emasculated all 434 representatives who aren't the Speaker of the House. But presumably those of her own party will do that willingly.
It is amazing when you think about how Congress has behaved over the last couple of years. The kind of stuff that they like to accuse Republicans of, but they don't ever seem to do it. But when they're in office, boy, they push this to the limit. And I'm really also glad you mentioned the fact that, truckers show up, grocery people show up. Why can't Congress show up? One thing to add to that is that the average drucker or grocer, they don't have the kind of Cadillac health care that's just waiting to take care of you guys. I mean, you guys, if you get sick, if somebody gets sick there in Congress, you're going to get that taken care of immediately. So is it fair to say that the safest place Nancy Pelosi could possibly be during this pandemic is in Washington, in the Congress?
There's literally a doctor in the basement here.
Right.
And by the way, I don't know of any other congressman that's turned down the health care besides me, but I turned it down because I thought it would be somewhat hypocritical to take taxpayer-funded health care and then rail against Obamacare. So I turned down the health program, but 99.9% of these congressmen have the Cadillac plan, and it's subsidized. It's not fully paid for, but it's largely subsidized by the taxpayer. And if you've got the best healthcare in the world, and you're in a building that has 2 police officers and a metal scanner at every door, this is literally the safest office building in the world, except for perhaps the Pentagon. And don't tell me you can't come to work that it's unsafe.
It's an amazing point. And, so have the vagaries changed for you? I mean, you were the odd man out when you were screaming constitutional values, when nobody on either side wanted to. Right. Now, and the left, too, right, has come back to constitutional issues when it's very self-serving for themselves. Where do you find yourself as the obvious constitutional guy? Are you still a man between parties, or have they embraced you a little bit more?
Well, Trump said I should be thrown out of the Republican Party when I quoted the Constitution. And I said, actually, the Republican Party needs to get back to its core, because I represent more faithfully than any other Republican here in Congress the platform of the Republican Party. And I know this might surprise you, but I haven't received a single apology from anybody. By the way, they're using my talking points today. In the lawsuit and on the news, they're saying if they pick the same professions, even they don't have much imagination: truckers, nurses, farmers, and grocery store workers. And so, hey, if this is what winning is, if they start doing exactly what you said they should be doing, and they don't give you any credit, I'm okay with that. I'm not tired of winning. I'm exhausted from winning.
It is amazing, isn't it, that it's it must be surreal to hear yourself being quoted by people, including the president, who, if they had their way, would have drummed you out of the party.
Oh, yeah. The president said that you need to show up for work. Even the Democrats, I heard Steny Hoyer say that we should vote. I tried to get a roll call vote on that stimulus package. Do you realize the biggest bill ever passed in human history doesn't have a recorded vote? People can claim they were against it later, but I've got them back to taking recorded votes now. Even if it's by proxy, they're still going on the record. So, I mean, again, we're winning here. They say one person can't make a difference. I didn't get a bill passed and I didn't stop a bill, but I feel like by showing up and demanding a quorum, I kept our Constitution from dying by unanimous consent in an empty chamber.
That's a lot to especially with everything going on. That is a lot to hang your hat on. And we remain grateful to you for your commitment to the Constitution. And I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Doc.